going after Nick.
Go around that way, that
We'll
clockwise.
go around this way. You've
Sure.
already introduced us.
Yeah, sure. Okay, go ahead, Art.
Art Dianelson, related to Diane. But I read one book lately, Ramsfeld's Rules of Governments and that, and he talks about the U.S. government and all the problems and how to solve them. And very excellent book if anyone wants to read a book on democracy or how to get things done.
Excellent.
It's a bestseller.
What is it again?
Right.
Rumsfeld's
Rules.
Hmm.
Rules he's put together over the years.
Cool.
Very good.
Is this discussion, could it include proportional representation? Are we limited to sort of civic issues, or can we talk about federal or provincial issues, or?
We are federal, but you are
I know
more
it is, but
you are more than welcome to discuss.
Proportional is a
because
good
your
one.
status
Yep.
as a city councilor, I wondered if you were.
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
can talk about anything.
Absolutely.
We know a little bit about everything, don't we?
Yeah, please don't hesitate. Because
Your name is?
Bob.
Bob.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of bring that up.
yeah,
And sort of ask how far along that has progressed or could progress at the city level and at the constituency level. Some kind of proportional representation, because what was her name? The federal candidate in Vancouver, the one that was promoting proportional representation during the Liberal leadership.
Joyce Murray.
Sorry?
Joyce Murray.
Joyce Murray, yeah.
Yeah.
She made a big deal out of it, and I think it should be made a big deal out of it. It should be kept. In fact, the group called Fair Roll Canada wants to make it a major issue in the next federal election.
I actually contacted Fair Vote and asked them to come out here, and they suggested that we bring out Stéphane Dion, and he couldn't come. And that was a big point because I had met Stéphane Dion during a debate with Burt Brown about Senate reform. And I thought he would be a great person to come out to talk about some of these different ideas. So I did contact Fair Vote. I did want to say that.
Do you remember who you talked to?
I could forward you the email if you want to send me your name and your number. I could, yeah.
Just recently?
Yeah, absolutely. I just put this together over the last summer, so I mean, we're talking.
Yeah, well, the local head honcho of Fair Vote has got some serious health problems within his immediate family and has been relatively inactive since he took over the position. I suspect that might be why you're not coming before us so much, but I think he really wants to, but I'm not sure he can right now. I don't know for sure.
Gotcha. All right.
Hi, my name is Kevin Sullivan. I'm with Calgary East Federal Liberals, and I'm just interested generally in what's happening with the party and initiatives and whatnot. And I had the email and was interested in coming really to hear as much as
My name's Carla. I'm actually living in the Southeast, and I got an email. I find this a very interesting topic because now with everyone's access to the internet, there's a lot of data out there. It's very difficult for people to be able to get the information or trying to manipulate the information. And another issue, so being accountable and transparent, I think is moving into the next century. And I believe now that there's a lot of cynicism towards media, like even myself included, because now I don't feel I'm getting all the information I want or I need in order for me to make decisions in my life. And I like having some measure of control to make decisions in my life, and I'm just not getting that information. So, and I feel that this present government, we're not getting it at all.
Yeah. Actually, that is part of the reason why I try to record these events, because first of all, you can ask the media to come, that doesn't mean they'll come. But second of all, if they do come, they'll decide to put it in their light. And we're in Calgary, and a lot of people I have met that say, I don't know why you're a Liberal, because, you're never going to make anything going on in Calgary. But I strongly disagree with that. I think that we can do a lot more if we just start recording it and let people know. I was just at a governing council meeting, and they just said to me, you're really inspiring, our board is inspiring other places to, do things like this. And That's the whole thing, is that we need to start inspiring our Liberals again to, get out and vote, to participate, to see that we can do these things. And we have so many people that have come out from out east that used to identify as Liberal voters. All we have to do is get them to the booth. So, yeah, I think that the media is a big part of why this is happening. Our last candidate, her name was Josipa. She grew up on Memorial Drive. And the Herald actually printed that she was a visitor. And I had my own neighbors say to me, "Oh, well, isn't she a visitor?" I said, "She grew up on Memorial Drive." And they said, "Oh, well, that's not what I read in the Herald." Well, talk about skew our campaign. That's what did it. So, when you talk about media, I absolutely feel the same way about that. And on our last event with the 420 group, we had Calgary Truth Media had a camera going, and that is the one that I'm promoting. Not because they're promoting the Liberals, but because they're just telling the whole story and not just a tainted point of view. So I think your point is really valid.
My name's Ryan, from Calgary Centre North, soon to be Calgary Confederation, and probably pretty much in the same boat as Kevin here, just here to kind of listen and see what other writings are up to.
Sounds good. Thank you.
My name is Lady Megan. I live in this community here, and I just want to get out and get more involved. We did do, last year, I did work with the Green Party in Stephen Harper's area, and got the candidate there, a whole bunch of signatures and stuff, but it's my own community and it will make a difference.
Hi, I'm Nergis Bilsa, and I'm running in this ward in the civic election, and this will be my third time. I've been in this ward for 33 years, and I totally agree with you about the media and how they can be manipulative and they print what they want to, because I've gone through the same. I've been a target and victimized by them too. So totally understand where you're coming from.
Wow. So it looks like media is a big topic, and I bet that you would have a lot to say about that because you've been a lifelong Liberal in Alberta.
I guess you would say lifelong, yeah.
Yeah.
My mother was conservative and my father was NDP, so I was born in southern Alberta. A year or so in the Navy at the end of the last war, and then I graduated mining engineering and geology in Alberta. I did one of the pioneers of it. Matter of fact, I was the first engineer on the first tar sand development. We call it tar sand now, they call it heavy oil mixture in late 40s. And because we had a growing family, I did I'm back in business as a consulting geologist now, but some in politics. Politically, a couple of years as a school superintendent, or not school superintendent, member of the school board in Calgary. And then I had 10 years in the Alberta legislature, some of it as leader of the opposition. That was when Lougheed was running everything, although when I finally finished the legislature, 10 years, it was Ralph Klein the last year or so. That was interesting. Because I was sort of more or less the in-house expert on energy because of my tar sand and oil experience, and on Aboriginal affairs because my grandmother was part Aboriginal from New Brunswick. And as a matter of fact, Peter Lougheed and I used to argue who had the most Indian blood, and he had a little bit more than I did, one part of his generation. So being part Indian helps you in Alberta politics, I think. After 10 years here at Senator, Chrétien appointed me to the Senate, which meant I was in Parliament of Canada for 7 years. And Senate and the senators and the MPs meet once a week, which the press doesn't mention because we meet in camera for a good reason. So that's the way. I'm just talking about political experience. You're talking about, I don't have the answers. Everybody knew the answer. I just come back from being a delegate on a retired parliamentary conference in Australia where they have compulsory voting,
Oh,
where everybody has to vote. They're not that happy with it either because with compulsory voting, you have a tendency that your election or you're being led by the mob,
right.
which may or may not do any thinking. On the other hand, what we have here is sort of those that are intellectually stimulated enough to participate in politics, have a dictatorship of running the country,
Yep.
because now, because of multiple parties, you can have 35 to 40% of the people that vote, and with only 25% of voting, that means 10% of your population is deciding how to run the country, and I think I've been all about it. So, people that exist under both systems don't like it. Americans get around it by saying if we didn't have if we left finance to be wide open like they do, and then the electioneer people, the candidates that raise the most money, do the most advertising, win the election. And Americans point to the fact that they get 50 or 60% out. We only get 40 or 50% out. That being allowed to put in all the money is a way of doing it. I was one of the key ones in Parliament that moved to try to, and we got it passed that money didn't matter. Every party got money from the taxpayers thing in proportion to the amount of money amount of votes they got last time. I thought that was a very good system, but the first thing Harper did when he got in power was throw it out. And you can see why. The Conservative Party, maybe 50 to 70%, because they're very much the spokesman for large of the powerful people in society, the big companies. Although there's a limit on how much you can give to a party, there's no limit to how many of your employees can give. So if you're a large company with a large number of employees, and you say to your employee, you give $500 to party A, and we allow you to have it in your expense account as entertainment, whatever you call it.
Yeah, right.
So the income tax is the government of the day is still paying a lot towards financing because all those donations are deduction. So therefore, taxpayers pay for it one way or the other. My argument and Mr. Chrétien's argument was that better to have it out coming from a subsidy and the amount of votes you got. I used to meet when I was a senator about once a year. Well, we meet about 4 times a year with American senators, but one of the meetings would always be involved on politics and so on. And the senator down there told me that, of course, it's the same as we have, almost the same. We have about 105 senators. That's about what they have. For them to be reelected every 4 years, they had to raise approximately $1 million a month. So you can imagine how much attention you were getting to put on political activity when you had to be out there raising that kind of money. And that was one of the reasons we changed the system, or tried to change it up here. And that talked about one system, compulsory versus the other. So the big argument is that that right now, because youth is the largest percentage of non-voters are youth. In other words, they're not interested yet. They don't see tie in. And of course, the largest percentage of voters are seniors. If you're over 60, you have about almost a 70% turnout. And if you're under 30, you're only down about 10%. So what happens when an election comes around, it's a jaded view, but if you're a manager, you got to win the election. Are you going to take your money and go out and try to get youth to come in and vote when so many of them ignore it? So they're going to ignore youth quite often, and the policies will be all geared to the seniors, you know, with health care and pensions and so on and so forth. Then there's another school of thought that if you work on getting youth interested, and some people are arguing marijuana is that, but I don't think so. Marijuana is something that people like myself are very much for freedom, because we were raised after the war or things, and we all have children and grandchildren who've had troubles with the police because of marijuana. So as a general rule, pro-marijuana, what's the word, legalization, is quite high amongst seniors, even higher than it is amongst, June just saw the survey. So I've discussed the voting power. Now the question is, in democracy, people are inclined to say, well, my vote doesn't count. Well, maybe your one vote doesn't count if there were only one, but Sir Edmund Burke, one of the great philosophers of English, he was conservative, by the way, said that all that is necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing.
Yes.
And that's the same way. That's the hardest thing to convince a person that says that my vote doesn't count. It means that somebody else's vote counted, because you weren't there to, it depends what the issue is. It doesn't matter what the issue is, but if you didn't think it was interesting enough to go out to vote, the person that thinks the other way is sure as hell out there, and you're back. So that's the hardest thing to explain to somebody, is that democracy is a moving forward machine, and if you don't participate, all that happens is that the person that participates gets their way of doing things. And that's the hard thing. Second thing is that I'm not so sure whether we do enough education in our schools on civics, on importance of voting. I think quite often, because not that I'm against teachers, because some of my grandchildren are teachers and children, but they get jaded views, and they have a tendency to pass to the students. Look, this government, you know, everybody's crooked. They do change this, change that. Well, if the students get that kind of an attitude from the teacher, it's going to be awfully hard to try to convince them to vote. But I think that's what a democracy really needs, is participation. If I have one other point I'd like to make, we'll open it up to questions, is especially we here in the West, we haven't, and this is where the schools have let us down, maybe even in the press, there's no idea that government is made up of both the majority and minority. We have a tendency to treat politics like a football game, or we're running a ranch. Who ever heard of a foreman in charge with an anti-foreman? But football, whoever heard of a quarterback with an anti-quarterback? We've got a single-minded. You've got to win. The opposition didn't count. Well, when democracy was put together by the Greeks, which is where the word comes from, demo or ocracy, there was the proposers and the opposers, and together they come up with a solution. The other one is there's a thesis put forward, antithesis put forward. The two argue is the synthesis. And that kind of thinking hasn't permeated enough into the public that they say, well, we've got to win. If I run, I'm going to lose. But the point is that the losers, it's not so much in city council maybe, because but even the losers in city council have a say, because the man or woman that has won the election realizes that they got to run against that opposition. So that's one of the failings that I think we have to get across, that democracy is not dictatorship of the majority, or it shouldn't be. It should be, and of course, I've shown my liberal colors when I mentioned Harper. Harper is not one that preaches about an opposition, but you have to have it.
Yeah.
Young Trudeau preaches about how necessary an opposition is, but that's the only one. So I'm open for questions.
All right. Anybody have some
I
questions?
so hope you speak up loud enough, because at the ripe old age of 86, my hearing isn't what it should be.
Would you like me to present first and then we can have questions?
Sure,
You'll
sure.
find this I'll speak first and then we'll have questions.
Okay.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Okay.
Okay.
That sounds great.
We've got a little
I'm
bit of
sorry,
different
I didn't
political
want to cut
history.
you off.
No, we've got
No,
different
good.
political history, so. It was interesting when Debbie said that she wanted to make a difference, and I became involved in my community because I wanted to make a difference. And I made quite a difference, enough that people started noticing, so all of a sudden it was, well, will you run for politics? And politics was not on my picture of all of the future. But I did run for council, as a member of council way back, and I was in a field of 8, and it was my first experience, and I'm sure I door knocked every single home, 3 months just to go on strong. Didn't lose any weight. But it was a good learning experience. There was 8 of us in, and I placed 3rd. And to this day, I figure if there was only 3 of us, I might have won. But I wasn't ready. And I know that now, looking back, so. But I also was approached by a principal, because I'd been very active in, not so much in the schools, but I was active in my community association and connected with the schools. So I was the one who actually went to the schools and said, would you do this? Would you help us with this? And that sort of thing. So they actually, there was probably about 8 schools that I was connected with. So that connection was very, very important. And I was asked if when the school trustees became ward-related, not city-related. That's how far back it was. They were all elected in the city. And when you looked at them, of the 7, they were all from the west. There was none from the east at all. So when they changed it into the ward, all of a sudden we got some representation from the east. And so I ended up serving 3 terms for wards 5 and 10, fairly large. There was 33 schools just in those 2 wards. And it probably was a good way to get into politics. It was a good foundation for leadership. You did discuss, you didn't debate. You were there for the kids. That was bottom line. So even though you may have needed a school in your area, if you knew that another area needed a school more, you voted for the kids. And so that was a very, very good learning experience. I don't know if that's there now, listening to the school trustees, but certainly that's how we, as in 3 terms, we had some very good, a group of trustees. 3 terms was a little much. I will tell you that on the 7th year, they have that 7-year itch, and I got a 7-year itch. And there is a point there where you feel that you've been there, you've done that, things keep repeating. There's a cycle. And I had the opportunity and was approached to run for MLA, so to get into the provincial side. And I actually thought about it because it was even a gender issue. I researched some of the issues, and from the position of a woman with a family, it's actually better to run as MP. The further you are away from your constituents, the better life you have. Now that was an interesting thing to note. And so, but unfortunately I ran against the incumbent, and he had this belief that anybody who was in opposition, who won and who was in opposition, should go home because they had no use in a democracy. There was no use in having other points of view. If you
Sounds
made
like
up the
social
government,
credits.
that was Hung Pham, who was conservative, so.
And we know what happened to him.
And we know what happened to him. So but it also made me aware that I needed to change my focus. And so I actually decided to retire from school trustee and not run. At that time, the sitting alderman decided to run for mayor. So all of a sudden, there was an opening in our ward, which is Ward 10 here. And again, I was approached to run. And so I said, okay. I knew enough, but because of being a community volunteer and being involved in the school, I knew enough about government, the municipal government, that I felt I would do a good job. So I did run, and I was a member of council for 2 terms, 6 years. It was a bit of a rude awakening, going from being a trustee to being a member of council. Because even though council is not based on parties, it's a debate situation, not a discussion situation. You have 8 votes. Whoever has the motion, if you have 8 votes, it's almost like the door closes. I was fortunate that Mayor Dewar was the first mayor that I worked with. And he was very, very good, because he actually was quite a good leader and focused on certain issues. Now, he told me that he learned the hard way in his first term that you needed to focus. He did everything anybody asked him to do, and it almost destroyed his family life. I knew from being a trustee, the same thing could happen. And you learn very quickly you don't take your work home. It's better to stay at work a little longer and not take it home. And it was so funny, because as school trustee, you were expected to be available in the evenings, because of course for school councils. As member of council, you were expected to be there during the day to take calls. So it was 2 different things. But in many ways, for a workload, I actually thought I died and gone to heaven, because I went from 33 schools to 8 community associations. So you were working with a different group of people. And but the actual feeling of being on council was different. I enjoyed it. It was a challenge. But I took some of the learnings from from being a trustee, as well as from talking to Mayor Al Dewar, that I tended to focus on issues. I would have a strategic planning session every year, and we focus on different issues. One of the reasons we have a tax on our gasoline to go right into the municipal pocket is simply because of Al Dewar, even though Broncondier got the credit. But those are things that you expect in politics. So. I ran a 3rd term, and I have to tell you that because I ran 3 terms in as trustee, I was actually debating about not running. But you always feel, it's really funny, you always feel that you've got unfinished. And I think a lot of politicians, in somehow or other, it's either a medical history, or they get voted out, or there's a scandal, or whatever, they tend not to want to choose to leave. And I felt that I had still something to contribute. Unfortunately, misuse of democracy happened, in that I was running against a candidate whose campaign put in 1,200 ballots, mail-in ballots from the same address, from people who no longer were here, from people who may weren't going to vote, but they actually sent in mail-in ballots, 1,200. This person.
You can name her. It's okay.
Well,
You can handle it.
it's Aftergood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Margaret.
Margaret Aftergood.
And then-
Margaret Aftergood. And she, it was a very, very unusual set of circumstances. One, totally blatant illegal, criminal.
And one man was involved.
Yeah.
And then her husband was running for Liberal. I can say that because
Oh, yeah.
I was right there. So, and the husband was trying to run for the MLA for Liberals here.
But what happened was, the way that the law was written is, they called us together, and the city clerk knew right away that something was definitely wrong, the election person, and said, there's nothing in the law, though, that allows us to take that person to court. It has to be somebody who lives here and who votes here. And we sat around, and she explained, because it was just totally new to me that this had even happened. And I'm so glad that city clerk came and told us that this, because it could have been hidden. It could have been hidden. But she said, she told us all about it, and then this Aftergood said, oh, well, it's too expensive to take to court. I'm sure nobody's dumb enough to take to court. Well, literally those words.
It's democracy.
And those were the wrong words to say to me.
Yes.
Went home, asked my husband, said this is a family decision because it is going to be expensive to take to court. And he said no, democracy is important, and that's it, we will go to court. We did go to court. We won in a funny kind of way, I have to admit. We were both given the opportunity to withdraw from the court battle, and she would be gone, and the city would pay for half of everything. They wanted 100%, and I said, no, this has got to go forward. And it turns out it was precedent setting. So I had a law firm that used every single student they had to cut costs, and it was a learning experience for them. But the bottom line is, she ended up being gone. They pulled out finally. There were people in her campaign that were charged. Mr. Aftergood was charged, found guilty, had to serve his sentence on weekends.
26 days?
Yes, and never did serve them. Yeah, put a stay on it. They left it. He appealed it, and after 2 years, they just said, okay, just put a stay on it. And unfortunately, 2 people who were kind of just workers in the cog of that whole fraud ended up having to pay some money and some. I don't think they had to pay any prison time, but they had to pay some money. They got hit in the pocketbook. They did, because their name was run through the mud. So it did come back. But I have to tell you that I learned a little bit about the justice system. Their hands are tied a lot by what has happened before in courts. And my lawyer often at one point would say, the judge has to do this. We know that this is what the judge is going to do. So it's not just media, the justice system. But we had a really good judge who actually bent over backwards. He knew it was wrong. But there was only so much he could do. And at the final thing, it was like, okay. So he started giving his recommendation, and he did about 3 paragraphs, and it really did sound like he was going to find the other party guilty. And they stood up, the lawyer stood up and said, we'll withdraw everything, we'll do everything, kind of thing. even though he went on to say he couldn't really find them guilty. It was just that kind of thing. The criminal court came back then and charged Mr. Aftergood and some of the campaign workers and stuff like that. But definitely, so she withdrew. She stopped being working on council, and they'd only been like 3 weeks. And just so you know, when people told me that she never opened a piece of paper the whole time in 3 weeks. There was mail piled up. She hadn't done anything in those 3 weeks. Maybe she knew the writing on the wall, I don't know. But they did get caught, and even though there was unsatisfied results, in this particular case, city clerk can take them now to court. It does not have to be a person from the ward. City clerk can take it. The case cost $250,000. No, I did not pay $250,000. The city ended up paying everything. And some of it is they should have stepped in a little quicker, but the bylaw has changed. The laws have changed that the city clerk can take that one. So that was a very change of life experience.
Educational experience.
You know, for democracy. It kind of won in the end, but it was really kind of not very good. We did have a by-election after that, and I have to tell you that I just felt within me that I had to run. It just was one of those things I couldn't leave with a bad taste. And so I did have to run. I had a good campaign. I had a campaign manager who volunteered. We had a very good campaign. But this particular group, the Aftergoods and the Hung Fams, put in a candidate. They supported, they actually got another candidate, supported him financially, the whole works. He didn't win.
And he's the president.
Very nice man that they supported, but unfortunately, my issues were more of a social issue. I was more on the liberal side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And they put in another candidate that was very similar. So we kind of split the vote, I think, is what happened. And so that is why Andre Chabot. But politics can be very nasty. I'd heard afterwards that there was, even though this particular candidate lost, there was glee in the room because the Wicked Witch was now dead. And anybody who knows me, I mean, I don't know where that came from, but we do feel that they were actually looking to have people at all orders of government in place. Not sure why, but they deliberately were trying, because Marg Aftergood is definitely not a candidate for council. She wouldn't have had the skills or the ability to be one. She was a victim in all of it, and I did feel a little sorry for her. So I have basically done 9 campaigns. My husband actually ran for MLA once, so there's 10 campaigns coming out of our house, and I've had 15 years of public service. So when you asked me about tonight, it was kind of, okay, now what kind of lessons did I learn? I have to say that I'm still absolutely pro-democracy. There's nothing really better than this, and we know too many things that are worse than this. So I put down some things that maybe the lessons that I've learned. In democracy, involvement is really being engaged with the process, and becoming informed is really, really important. And it does not stop with the vote. You have to participate. And I think that's where we're going to get the young people, in some way having to participate. I know in some of the things like in the Netherlands countries, they actually have kind of mini referendums where they have almost phone conversations. They put together a campaign, and then you actually almost get to vote on these motions. And if there's a definite no, they keep going, and they keep going and massaging it a bit until it's a solution that they can all come with. I absolutely believe politicians should be in for public service, not for jobs. And unfortunately, I think a lot of them are in because it's a job. voting options are, it's really funny because even though the mail-in ballot was such a fiasco for me, I do feel that that you need different voting options.
Yep.
And I think some of those, the technical stuff that's happening will eventually lead to much better voting options so that the young may in fact vote and be a little bit easier. Democracy is better if you trust the people that are there, and you know, it's that thing out there that, you know, politicians aren't much worse than, or as lawyers kind of thing, so it's, or salesmen, I think it is, so. But it's even better with transparency. So if you have the two, and it's not the best thing, so you can be very, you know, because even now I see some things, the latest, you know, the Calgary Board of Education trying to be transparent and not trying very hard, but they are niggling at it. But to argue over a $1,200 dinner in recognition for their senior staff, I just thought that's transparent, but then all of a sudden it's like out there and it's that, because people can understand 1,200. Even though that may be 0.000001 of the budget, you know, kind of thing, but they can understand it. It's really hard to understand the millions. My first committee that I ever sat in as a volunteer, I sat in there for 30 seconds and they spent $6 million on a sewer system. So I thought, holy cow. Hidden agendas are alive and well. I found that out. But I will tell you, there's a lot of good people who are politicians. They're good people. I respect actually a lot of them, but they're not leaders. A lot of them are not leaders, and there's no time taken to learn leadership, because you can learn leadership, and leadership is very time consuming. And it was when I first became a councillor, one of the questions, I was getting calls on potholes and all these other little things, and I finally went up to administration and I says, something's failing in the bureaucracy, in the system, if I'm getting those kind of calls. I don't want to deal with those calls because that's administrative duty. And he turned around to me and he said, oh, the aldermen like those calls because that's, if they help that person, that's a signed location for the next election.
Oh.
And this fellow actually, after we then worked on putting the 311 in place. So that worked, that got it out of the alderman's office.
Awesome.
We also put, if you look in the phone book, it's now Office of the Alderman, not Alderman. So
Yes.
we're not first in the thing. But it was actually after about 2 years, he actually came and apologized to me. And he says, we really do need to separate. We need to do a better job as administration. So, so I was very thankful that it took a little bit of learning.
That's such a historic conversation.
Yeah. But I also, the whole thing about discussing, not debating, I believe we should have 2-year terms. That probably, and now especially when they're 4 years at the municipal level, and I know they're trying it at the provincial level. I think she's trying to do it to 5-year terms and set terms. That nobody should serve more than 2 terms. It can't be a job, you know. And I was guilty of maybe running longer than I should have. And we talked a bit about monies. You brought up about the monies and that sort of thing and who covers you. We sometimes work at it from the wrong way about who gives you money, but maybe we need to limit the amount of money that you need to run. It's been 9 years, 10 years, but I spent $3,000 a year for a school trustee and $10,000 to run as member of council. Mm-hmm. That's unheard of, but I had 100+ volunteers. So it really makes you work. And those numbers are probably way outdated, but that's another way to come in to limit is actually limit the amount of money they can raise. Who cares if it's one person that gives it to you? If you limit the amount you raise, then there's a bit of a more equal playing field. At the municipal level, and well, actually at any level, because the sign bylaws cover all orders of governments, and the sign bylaw definitely favors the incumbent. And there's no question.
In what way?
It's exactly what I said, that if you help somebody, it's a potential sign location. Because it's the locations on the yards that you get. They've limited where you can put it on public property. And when you go to Edmonton, you know there's an election on. You know. There are signs everywhere. And here, it's very limited where you can put the signs on public property. So that's a limiting factor. And the bottom line is we really do need people to run. And both genders, you need all kinds of perspectives. And it really talks about the values and their courage. And it's really tough to be courageous when you're a politician. It's easier when you're a trustee or on council, but I will tell you that once you're a party member, it is a little bit harder to be courageous. You're much more strategically focused when it's a party situation. Michael Ignatieff was on the other day, and he was saying some things that's what happens. You know, you're kind of who you are, and then you have to change slightly when you're in party politics. But I was willing to run for party politics, and I had a leader at the time who was willing to take me as I was. And I work behind the scenes. I'm not in your face. I'm not particularly adversarial. But my email is Outspoken Diane. So open for questions.
I don't have a question, but I do have something to add to your spouse. I don't know if everybody is aware of this or not, but Ralph Klein was a true liberal.
Oh, yes.
And in '83, when we were campaigning for John Leader, was it Leader, his last name? The temporary, the 3-month premier we got into.
Who's this?
The liberal John. I think his last name was
You're
Leader.
losing me somewhere, John.
Leader?
John Leader?
Oh, that's Raj.
I'm pretty sure it was his
Yeah,
last.
Raj is Punjabi. You are Punjabi.
No. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about the federal.
John
Oh,
He was
federal.
the-
John Turner. Oh,
John
okay.
Turner.
I thought you were
Yes.
talking provincial.
Trudeau.
Sorry.
No, I'm
Okay.
talking federal. And so when his campaign was over, we actually, as liberal groups, had gone to Ralph Klein before he was even approached by the conservatives to be a premier for the provincial Liberal Party. And he was almost going to accept it, except things kind of turned. And
Oh, there's people here that, Manmeet, who's one of our, Manmeet Bhullar is
Yeah.
one of our MLAs, and he's a minister.
Yeah.
He's much more liberal than conservative.
exactly. And he, Ismailis who came from East Africa in the late 60s and early 70s are true liberals because they are very faithful to what Trudeau had done for them. And so most Ismailis now are here. And regardless, they still vote liberal. That includes me too. So that's our history as liberals. And
Yeah, I'm not sure in the center whether you have the same issues as we have in this end of town, because it's fairly diverse and we're usually one of the lowest voting. And the different cultures in our area
yeah.
I'm sure affects our voting patterns. Poverty affects our voting patterns. People with they're working 2 jobs affects our voting patterns. It's an uphill battle here.
Plus, our immigrants here are mostly not Canadian citizens, and so they are not able to. They are either going on 9 years refugee status.
Yeah, but even the ones that we have on the list, we'll have 20%, 18 to 20% voting. So we have
So we do need
we're
to
always
change
one of
that.
the few. Yeah, and it is an uphill battle, and
I
think
work
it
for
needs-
Calgary Board of Education as a job thing, and work with the outreach program. I've been working with the high school students forever. I've done foster care. People often ask me when I go door knocking, what political experience do you have? And I may not have a direct experience, but as a 17-year-old back home, it was accepted. My first job was with town council. My second job as an 18-year-old was with United Nations International, UNICEF, for 3 years. So I've been working directly, indirectly in Canada for 35 years with the feds when I was in Ottawa for 5 years, and here with provincial government for 10 years, and then I've been contracted with Children's Services forever. So that's my, and for anybody who doesn't know what my credentials are, I have a master's degree in forensic psych, and I'm doing presently my PhD. So that's who I am. So please come and vote for me, even if you don't know who I am.
I guess I'd like to make a comment. I guess realizing, listening to you, that I was very fortunate to have some really good teachers when I went through school. And one of the things that stuck with me, I don't recall what teacher said this to me, is that it's very easy to complain, but it's hard to come up with solutions. If you're going to complain, come up with solutions and options for people to listen to. And I find that's one problem I would find with the media, that it's very easy to put that one view in, and then that's it. And you wonder why people are not engaged. Now, I happened to kind of catch something in what you said. You said when you did the court challenge, it cost the city $250,000. It wasn't the city, it was the taxpayer that paid
Yeah, it was
for
the
that.
taxpayer.
And as a taxpayer, if I heard that, I'd be very upset.
And it was all because of a law.
And all because of a law. And I'm actually very glad for the Council of Canadians to take the federal Conservatives to court over that. It was not voter suppression, that was voter fraud. That was sending people, giving deliberate calls to people, sending them to the wrong station. And there's been nothing done with that. And it doesn't take, and you wonder why there's voter skepticism.